All right, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the marketing research class. Today we'll be looking into chapter 9, which is questionnaire design. So I'm currently sharing a screen here showing a Microsoft PowerPoint slide, chapter 9. If you can just in the emoticon box here, comment for me if you can hear me as well as you can see the screen. So comment with any face there, any emoticon face for me to confirm that, then we can continue with class for me, please. Are you able to see the screen and hear me very well, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes.
Thank you for that. Ngwenya, thank you very much. Thank you for that, Temili Dwaba as well. Okay, so Chapter 9, we also gonna use the textbook, so it will be a good idea to have a textbook in front of you because you'll need to highlight as well as to indicate where we get this information because in the questionnaire design is part of your project that you will be having in the WHEEL program. You've got a second semester subject called WHEEL, stand for Work Integrated Learning. And then part of that is for you to develop a research questionnaire for a company for that particular project that you'll be dealing with. But more to that to later. So right now, let's focus on theory as well as focus on the practicality of measurement and questionnaire design on chapter 9. So in the textbook, we are on page 174. Measurement and questionnaire design. And then you will see there you've got the learning outcomes of the chapter, which we also have them in the study guide. And then this assessment criteria, it prepares you as well as it allows you to prepare for an assessment. You will be actually at the end of the learning this chapter, you'll be able to do the following. The steps for designing a questionnaire are illustrated and discussed. So we're going to look at those steps, as well as to discuss them practically. A questionnaire for a research project is designed based on those guidelines. So you'll be able to design a research questionnaire using those guidelines, as well as for the project that I've mentioned. Question or response formats are distinguished and practical example is provided for each. We've got different types of response formats. For example, your open-ended question, your closed-ended question, your multiple choice. We're going to differentiate between the one that we use in marketing research. And then 4 levels of measurements are discussed. We're going to talk about the nominal data, ratio data, and so on. And then the last one, it's important. You should be able to evaluate if we provide you with a questionnaire, and then evaluate if there are any errors in those questionnaire, as well as suggest practical suggestion how those errors can be corrected. So that's another practicality. So if you can be able to do the following in this chapter, we can say we have achieved the objective. So let's start with the guidelines for designing a questionnaire. So we're gonna skip those page 176. We're gonna come back to them. It just makes more sense for us to start with those guidelines from the beginning. So we're quickly gonna run to page 191, where it says questionnaire design guidelines. You need to highlight that maybe and just write NB somewhere there. You've got the figure on figure 9.2 on page 192. It shows you the guidelines that you're gonna follow in designing the questionnaire, which are similar to the one on the slide. And then those guidelines, they start with step 1, where we specify the information that we're gonna need. So let's look into these guidelines into more details, just a little bit. So I'm gonna open a Microsoft document there where we're gonna apply those guidelines into some sort of a case study. So yesterday I've sent you an email containing 2 learning activities. Learning activity 8 and 9, we'll be working on those learning activities. So let's quickly open those learning activities. Let's start with learning activity 9. The one about Showmax. You have it on your emails and it's also opened here. And then let's maybe open a blank document that we'll work on. Let's say we're gonna design a questionnaire for Showmax. We're gonna call it learning activity 1. Questionnaire design. So let's refresh our mind regarding the case study. So in the next 1 to 2 minutes or 2 to 3 minutes, we're gonna read the case study just for us to understand the story there. So let's read the case study about Showmax. No need to have anything in the background. So just read it as a novel as quickly as possible. We should actually have an understanding by now, but just to refresh our mind. So let's say read the Showmax. So you must download it on your emails if you don't have it. Case study, which is learning activity 9. Okay, so right now it is 9 minutes past 1. So let's say at 12 minutes past 1, we will continue with class. So I'm gonna mute my mic so that we can concentrate and refresh our mind about reading that case study. Okay, the case study about Showmax. So just to quickly summarize so that we're up to speed here. So you will see that basically our duty and responsibilities as marketing researchers start somewhere here. We are required to conduct a research regarding the influence of promotional activities towards purchase of online subscription video on demand service. We also need to determine or investigate awareness, expectation, as well as preferences. You'll see them. Interviewing 450 respondents in Durban. That will guide us in terms of the data collection. So we know already this is a large sample size, which makes it a quantitative study. And this also tells us that this is a quantitative study because they also have specific aspects that they want to investigate. So firstly, we need to design a questionnaire for this company, and looking at the guidelines, the first thing that we need to do here is to specify information that is needed in a questionnaire as step 1. And then you will see in the textbook itself there, specifying the information that you needed. You can get it from your research proposal. Your objectives are information that you need. You can take your research question, you can take your hypothesis. So in this case, let's take our research objectives, which we have them here. So I'm going to quickly copy that. And then we are designing a case, a research questionnaire for Showmax here using the guidelines itself. So this is what we get from the case study. So let's just have that step 1 there. Specify we are specifying the information that we need from the research. So let's just make it a bit cleaner. What we need here in this research, firstly, we need, this is our title, the influence of promotional activities towards purchase of online subscription video on demand service. Was this your semester test too, or your class test, or your quiz test, the case study? Can you please confirm for me? It just crossed my mind. I think you wrote about it in a test, right? Anyone?
Yes, it was the last one that we wrote, the last test that we wrote.
The one about quiz, ne?
Yes, the quiz, the Showmax thing.
Oh, so at least, yeah, it's something that we can all relate to. So at least we are aware of all this information that we have here. So the information that we need, the influence, awareness, thank you for that. Awareness, they also set expectations. We should remember in the I'm just gonna mention this in the research proposal. This becomes your secondary research objectives, but you must always write with the word to, so to determine, to evaluate, and so on. But for now, we're just specifying the information that we need. So in this case, it just makes it simpler. So you take every research objective that you have, primary, secondary, like you are guided here in the textbook. You can also take research questions, you can take hypotheses. All of those, they tell the research project what information is needed there. So let's move on to the second step. The second step is on page 193. Step 2 there. Specify the type of questionnaire and the method of administration. So let's start with the type of questionnaire. We've got different types of questionnaire, and I want to relate this to your research proposal guidelines, your overall research proposal guidelines as well. So let me do it step by step. Let's start by having that step 2. And in this case, we have to specify the type of questionnaire as well as a method of administration. So we've got different types of questionnaires. So I'm going to illustrate all of them here because you'll need to know the difference between the three, as well as when you apply them in the research proposal, which type of questionnaire you are using. So let's take that information and use it in a table just to make sure that you understand there. Okay. The first type of questionnaire that we have, we refer to it as unstructured. I think we spoke about this at some stage. Unstructured, and when we talk about unstructured questionnaire, we're talking about whereby we are actually interviewing the respondents, but we don't ask them questions. So there are no questions prepared. So it's an empty document, a blank page, basically, that we go into the discussion with. Have nothing in mind. The respondent will guide us throughout there. And then we've got semi-structured. With the semi-structured, we prepare questions in mind, but these questions, we don't prepare the response for them. So semi-structured, this will be in situations whereby we prepare only open-ended questions. So let's quickly say open-ended. What is your opinion regarding something, and so on? So a respondent must give answers in detail. The next type of questionnaire, we've got the structured questionnaire. Structured questionnaire, on the other hand, is the questionnaire whereby it got only close-ended questions with numbers. The respondents cannot write, they can only select. And then with, so I'm gonna write closed-ended. They can only select complete, it could be multiple choice, it could be scales, and so on. So in this case, we know that we are, when we use unstructured, because the respondents have to talk their opinions, usually we do this under qualitative study. So when you do qualitative study, you can do this one as some sort of a focus group where you put the focus group, it could be in-depth interviews as well. Focus group is 6 to 12 people, in-depth interviews one-on-one. Same thing with open-ended question, you can use that in a focus group. In a quantitative studies, which we are using now, we can only use a structured questionnaire. This is because we interview a lot of people, large number of respondents, large sample size. So we cannot afford to spend more than 15 minutes with one respondent or spend one number of hours with respondents. That's one of the reasons. Another reason that we need our data or our data that we're gonna collect, we need it to be in numbers. Hence, we call it a quantitative study. It must be analyzed. So we must have those numbers, and we categorize information in a questionnaire. So they select numbers basically when they select their answers or their responses. So with the quantitative, we've discussed the method of administration. Remember last class we talked about quantitative data collection methods, and this include, like, you can call them such as telephone, and basically we refer to this as surveys. So the method of administration could be telephone, person to person, for example, your personal interviews, etc. Then mail interviews and so on. So in this case, we must determine which type of questionnaire we're gonna use. So logically tells us that we're gonna use this one because already we know that it's a quantitative survey that we're gonna conduct for Showmax. We've got a couple of reasons why we say that. We've got a large number of respondents that we are interviewing. We've got a hypothesis that we need to test. So since it is quantitative, obviously we're gonna use a structured questionnaire. So with the type of questionnaire, we've already answered that part. So I'm gonna quickly highlight that. Or just remove that. I'm gonna quickly remove this. I think you have it in mind now. Yeah. So we have determined that we'll use a structured questionnaire, close-ended. The method of administration, which one are we gonna use in this case? Let's quickly look in the case study. The chosen data collection method should allow interviewers to explain, you can see there, to explain and answer questions about void, term, during the screening process in an effort to reduce participation of refusal. It's a vessel that interview should be less than 10 minutes. So the chosen data, this date guide us. So in the chat box, please indicate for me which data collection method should be used, which will allow interviewers to explain and answer questions about void. So let's have a class learning activity for that. So that's gonna be our learning activity 2. Okay, in the chat box, please comment. The data collection method that should be used. To allow interviewers to explain and answer questions, yes, during the screening process. So it is now 25 past. It is a 2-minute exercise. So think about those data collection methods that we had. 2 minutes. So let's say, since right now it's 25 minutes past, okay, let's say it's 26 minutes past. I'm gonna mute myself here so that you can concentrate on this question and answer it in the chat box. At 28 minutes past, we will continue. All right, you'll remember those data collection methods that we have. You can refer to page 132. We've got the data collection methods there for surveys, methods that should be used, personal interviews, telephone interviews, postal surveys, as well as web-based surveys. So in this case, they've indicated that we need a method whereby we allow interviewers to explain. So in a telephone interview, that could not work because we're using calls to call these people. With personal interviews is the best one to allow explanations. So because you can clarify the answers. So personal interviews in this case, that's what we suggest. And we are done with step 2. And then step 3, you will see there is quite a lot that we need to look into in step 3. This is about determining the content of individual questions. Going back to the slide. Determine the content of individual questions. So basically, before we ask all these questions, we must evaluate in terms of the question that we're going to ask. Is it really necessary? Will it cover the objective? Should we ask it? Should we ask one question or several questions? We've got all this theory in the book about those content of individual questions. So coming back to our practical example that we are using here, we've got.
Someone is in the lobby, sir.
You can accept them, please. Are you able to accept?
No.
No, okay. I think there's someone accepted for me. Thank you for that, for accepting. So with step 3, we say we determine, let's quickly write that. You'll see we have those steps on page 192 in that figure there. Determine the content of individual questions. Anyone who logged in to Brightspace currently before logging into class have access to accept people on the lobby. So please help me and accept them. Content of individual questions. So basically, we already have this information that we need as step 1. So right now, we need content regarding these individual questions that we're gonna ask in terms of the respondents. So what content are we gonna ask in terms of the influence? What content are we gonna ask in terms of awareness, the expectations, and so on? So let's do them one by one, starting with the first one. The content that we're gonna ask here, we want to find out the influence, whether people are influenced by sales promotions to buy online subscription video on demand. I think ETV launched their new one, eVoid or something, a few weeks back. And then we want to know that if people have are influencing, such as maybe if they give you a trial or a subscription whereby you don't pay for 3 months, or they give you, like in the case study that we've read, they talked about Vodacom giving people Showmax 3 months, Telkom giving them 1 month, and so on. So we want to know if those types of sales promotions, those are sales promotion or any marketing promotional offer that they give to consumers, free data and so on, they actually make people or influence them to purchase those subscription video on demand. So basically here, you wanna come with content under each. So here we wanna find out things such as data. We're gonna ask her the content. It could be about data. Let's start with free trial. It could be about free trial. The content that we should ask about question, which is a promotional activity, could be a free trial, which could be a 30 days free access that they use. It could be about free data. And then we've got one, which this is referred to as sales promotion. If you want, you can write a sales promotion. I think you'll remember it from your advertising as well. And they say we want to see if the influence towards purchase. So we can also look at cancellation, whether the contract was cancelled or the trial was cancelled or it continued, which means that people were influenced. They started on a free trial, or where did they hear? How do they recommend? So these are the type of questions that we can ask underneath. So in this case, you have to determine under awareness, what can we ask about regarding video on demand? For example, this question, it could be either yes or no, people are aware. It could be knowledge. It could be things such as, have they ever heard about it, and so on. So knowledge, can you tell me the different types of void, for example? Or it could be something such as aware or not aware, or ever heard about it or not. That's the content of the questions we want there. Under expectations of customers, what do you think customers expect when they actually sign up for this Netflix, Showmax, and so on? We can expect customers to say maybe their actually expectations is that they expect to see movies, local content. It could be international content. Or maybe they want to see local content. Maybe they want to see sports, but I doubt that's their expectations. But we can ask them if they still want to see sport. But we know things such as Netflix doesn't have sport, but Showmax have it. So we can ask all these questions. The preferred device for streaming. What are we going to ask? The content that could be smart TV. It could be mobile, smartphone. Or they prefer a computer. And then if you go back to the slide, you will see there. Once we have this content, we ask ourselves if we can ask them in one question. The idea is to ask them in all of them in one question. In other words, what you want to do, you want to make one question that ask about all these free trial data and so on. You group them as one. Or if you ask them about expectations, you ask them in one question instead of asking them in different questions about expectations. But depending on the question, you're still going to develop a question for each, which will make more sense once we get to that. There is something, responsibility, ability to answer, willingness to answer. And then in terms of, are the questions gonna answer our research objectives that is in the textbook? We see that they do, but they are incompletely. So we need another question here because we don't know who these people are. And then is to collect demographic. We must always collect the demographic profile of respondents so that we know who they are. For example, we can ask them things such as gender, things such as age, income, education level, and so on. Remember, I'm doing this practically, but you will see the idea is to have a questionnaire as our final product. So a question that you can expect is to develop a questionnaire for a research project, for any assessment, instead of doing this step by step, you will only present a final product, which is a questionnaire, but you will go through this on your own in your Scramble book somewhere there. So let's look into step 4 of the guidelines. Decide on question format and response formats. And now I want us to highlight in the textbook some page that we'll be using, and there are different types of questions that you have in the textbook there, and we don't use all of them. So let's start with the ones that are selected that are shown in the PowerPoint slide, and then you highlight as well in the textbook itself. So we've got structured questions with structured response, which we know them called close-ended. That is a type of question format. That's the first one we have. And what you want to highlight there, it's on page 196 in the textbook. On page 196, you want to highlight there where the heading that says question or response format, the first one being structured question with structured response. You can read through the advantages and disadvantages. We just want to focus on the ones that are shown on the slides there. The first type that we have is called a Tactonomias question, whereby it only have 2 responses. The term Tactonomias comes from the word 2. It means only 2. This is a yes or a no, true or false question. You cannot have more than, if once it becomes 3, it's no longer a Tactonomias question because those responses. Remember, it's a close-ended question, so we must provide respondents with answers already. We've got a multiple choice, which is we are familiar mostly with. Multiple choice, any question that is 3 or more, having 3 or more structured responses. They could be 9, they could be 5. And then the multiple choice, I just have to indicate or emphasize here that they differ. In the textbook, I think they tell you about that on page 197. Multiple choice questions, we've got 2 different types of multiple choice questions. We've got multiple choice question with 1 answer. For example, you can choose only 1 answer. For example, such things such as your marital status, single, divorced, and so on. And then we've got whereby you can choose more than 1 answer. For example, that could be, for example, select your favorite brands, and then a respondent can select more than 1. And then you will see we've got other types of questions that we look into. For example, a ranking question on the next page, on page 198, but it's not on the slide. So I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to focus on the last one, which is number 4. You can highlight on page 198. It's called a scaled question. Scaled question, which we refer to it as mostly such as a Likert scale. You've got an example in the textbook. The respondent answers this question by making a certain point on a scale. In a scale question, the respondent's actual position is measured on the attitude. And then they show you that scale. For example, it could be from very good, which is 1 to, okay, there's a mistake in the textbook here. Why do we have very good to very good? From something such as not good to very good, it should be phrased like that. And then you need also to highlight on page 199 structured questions with unstructured response. That's the second type of a response format that we have, structured question with unstructured response, which we refer to them as open-ended questions. The open-ended questions on page 199, it reads, encourage respondents to compile and express their own responses freely with the lack of fixed response categories. So there are no categories that you choose from. They simply can write their own answers there that we know. So these are the main types of questions or response format that we can use. In research, it is advised that you use scale as much as possible, because we're going to talk about the types of data that you collect right now, and then we're going to differentiate between these questions, what type of data they collect. You will see that only scale questionnaire collects some of the data that you can analyze to see things such as mean, medians, and so on. The other ones, they will just collect information where you'll have to count. For example, it could be frequency, it could be things such as your mode, which number appeared the most, rather than what is the middle value, and so on. So doing this practically, coming back to our steps here. Decide step 4, questionnaire format and response formats. So what we want to do here, we want to ask the questions. This becomes more practical now. So firstly, we want to ask a question about the influence of promotional activities on video demand, and we have to ask whether we're going to, in this question, how are we going to ask that question? The awareness, we have to ask about expectation, the preferred device, as well as the demographic profile of respondents. So in this case, you can structure your questionnaire. It is always recommended that you use a scale questionnaire where you can. So the influence of promotional activities towards, let's copy that information there. I'm going to copy it from number 1. And I'm going to quickly ask those questions for us. So you can ask this question because what it wanna see whether people agree or disagree. So what we need here, we need an agreement question, because when you say you wanna find out if something influence people, people must actually agree or disagree. So we're gonna use a scale. In a questionnaire, we can quickly develop a scale. It is recommended that you use a 5-point scale. So when we talk about 5-point scale, we're talking about the points that the consumers select. We've got a 5-point scale like the one that is shown on page 198, and the one that I'm doing now here, as well as 7-point scale, which is not recommended to use. So let's ask this as a question. We will say, please indicate the level of agreement with the following statements. Obviously, we can always do some language editing somewhere before it gets approved. You'll remember we're just doing it now roughly. Please indicate the level of agreement. So a person can strongly, and now we have a scale now here, strongly agree, just agree, maybe neither here, and then they can disagree with the statement, strongly disagree. And you will see this is why we call this one a 5-point scale, because it's got 5 points. If it's got 7 points, you will see other options, all continuing with the agreement level. And then we can put our statements there. So let's quickly have a statement. Our first statement, I'm going to edit now and see if people agree or disagree with that. We're going to talk about the importance of numbers that you put here in this question. For example, which one should have 1? Is it strongly agree or strongly disagree? Can think about that for a minute for now. And then let's put statement number 1. You'll remember we've developed the content here. So a first statement that we want to ask them is should be about free trial. I'm going to quickly copy this as well. Okay, so it should be about the trial, but this is a statement, so let's put it in a statement format. So please remember we want to test the influence of promotional activities. Free trials such as 30 days free access influence me to sign up for online subscription video on demand. So this will be, I think they use the term as on demand void. Yeah. So this becomes statement number 1. Let's put another statement. If let's say maybe if I receive free data we're gonna write it as a hypothesis. If I receive free data, I will sign up for online subscription video on demand. That's the second one. Okay, so we've got statements there. Which one do you think should have the highest number? There's a strong debate about this in research. If you can unmute your mic and say your opinion, which one do you think should have a small number? Strongly agree or strongly disagree? What do you think, guys? Yebo?
Can't we use ticks? Can't we use ticks to check
Not,
if you agree or strongly disagree?
it's important that we use numbers because we're gonna transfer these numbers. It's important, and the number is important. It must be a number.
Okay.
Yeah, so but which one do you think? Strongly agree will be 1 or 5. Which one? Should we go from 1 to 5 or 5 to 1? Strongly agree to strongly
Let's go
disagree?
1 to 5.
1 to 5. So if I agree, would you associate that with 5 or 1? So let's see. Let's go from 1 to 5. There's a research about this. I want us to for us to to apply our perception of the eye here. Does the number 5 indicate I'm strongly agreeing or disagreeing? Or, let's see. If you look at this question, maybe we can do it vice versa and have 5, because when I strongly agree to something, maybe I have a stronger opinion, so it must be a larger number. I don't know. There is a research about this, so obviously we'll be guided by research. So we will read more about research to tell us which one has the higher number and so on. But I think it should be like this. Strongly agree should be 5. So for example, if I just apply the perception of my eye here, if I receive free data, I read the statement. If I receive free data, I will sign up for an online void. If I tick 1, I strongly disagree. If I tick 5, I think I strongly agree. So maybe something like that. So we refer to this as a scale questionnaire. Remember, we decide on the questionnaire format and format of response. And then we will do the same for the next question. We've already asked us, we will ask about awareness. For example, here we can ask awareness in terms of, let's quickly have that one as a short question. Oh, we already copied that one there. So we need another question here. Awareness. All right. I'm gonna propose 2 questions here. And I want you to indicate for me which one do you think it makes more sense. The first question that I'm gonna propose is this one, testing awareness. So are you aware? Are you aware of? And I must also indicate that when you develop questions here, you become you talk about the respondents, like. But when you ask these research questions, I've saw some of you use the terms like referring to the respondents in your research questions. You cannot do that in research questions. For example, I'm gonna quickly change this into a research question for you to make sense. For if this was we wanted to be a research question, it will be to what extent are consumers aware of online subscription video on demand services? But I've seen some students asking this question, such as, to what extent are you aware in the research questions? And that it's wrong. So you cannot use the term you in a research question as if you're referring to a respondent. We only use this in a questions itself of the research of a questionnaire, the instrument. But in a proposal, remember, a proposal does not reach the respondents. The proposal is just the researcher in the company or the client. Okay, are you aware of? Okay, let's change it differently. Which online video on demand services subscription video on demand are you familiar with? You can ask this in a table, for example. Here we can have, let's quickly add another column. Netflix, for example, is number 1. You can have yes or no, or they can tick. But obviously we need numbers. Like I've indicated, it's important to allocate numbers, but it doesn't matter the number. You can put 1 for a no, yes, or for 1. It really doesn't matter, but we just need that number so that we can analyze the data. Show max. I think we've got other ones. There's a telecom one. There's VU. Is it VU or what? There's Apple TV, maybe. There's Prime TV, Amazon. If we conduct a research on this, it will help us and maybe provide the other option, and then they specify the one they are familiar with. Okay, but once you provide the other option, it becomes an open-ended. We're going to talk about that, limiting to be a closed-ended question. I'm going to replace that with Amazon. There's ETV one, evoid that they have, yeah. So let's have that one here. You can either ask this question like this, or you can ask it differently. This one, we will refer to it as a Tactonomias question because it got only 2 answers. So I'm going to ask it as a scale now instead of a Tactonomias question. I want to show you the importance of using scales instead of using any other type of a questionnaire. So every time you do a scale, you try and make it a 5-point scale. So it must have 5 points. So this is about awareness. We always use those strongly aware, strongly disagree, because they, so this one will be strongly aware, just aware, average. There is some research that can guide us in the terms that we can use here. So it won't be these terms. Actually, it will be extremely aware. I think the terms that we should use here, or the scale is extremely aware, and then there is followed by moderately. I know there is moderately somewhere. There is not at all aware, which is the first one, not at all. It's followed by somewhat. Let's look at the questionnaire that we have here under void. They have those scale here, okay. Slightly aware, not at all, slightly, somewhat, moderately, and extremely. So you can use that as well, because those are the terms that are used. So it's slightly here. Somewhat. And you'll see with the numbers, the higher the awareness, the higher the number. All right, so if you're gonna ask this question using this method of yes or no, it's not gonna actually tell you the awareness level. It's just gonna tell you whether they are aware or they are not aware, but to what extent they are aware, that's the problem. So you don't know whether they are mostly aware or actually extremely aware. So the scale, it becomes important. So always opt for a scale if it's possible. Some questions you cannot ask them in a scale. For example, this could be things such as demographics. Cannot ask a person in terms of demographics, their gender, or things such as their age. It's just straightforward answer, so it cannot be a scale there. So we understand. But where you ask about opinions, you ask about things such as satisfaction level, perceptions of respondents, you want to use a scale as much as possible. Okay, the last thing that we have to look into in this chapter, after the response format, is the type of data that you want to collect. So this is in the beginning of the textbook. So we're going to go back in the beginning. And these are called levels of measurement on page 175. So it's important for you when you develop these questions to think what type of data that you want. You can either collect the data, we refer to it as nominal data, or it could be ordinal data, interval data, or ratio data. So the data that you collect, it can be categorized into 4 levels. And then the difference between these levels is the analysis that you can do, the data analysis that you can do. For example, nominal data, you can do certain analysis on it that you cannot do on ordinal data. And then continuing with interval data, you can do all analysis that some limitations have with nominal data, which means I cannot analyze the data using, if it's nominal. Let's make an example. Nominal data, for example, you cannot use mean or median there. However, with interval data, you can calculate the mean and median, but we're going to talk a lot more about this. It's going to make more sense once we look into a practical example. How you interpret that data, for example, you cannot say the average of the average of gender. For example, you cannot calculate the average of gender in your stats that you've collected, because gender itself, it got categories, and those categories we refer to them as nominal data, because it's just categories. They have no meaning, those numbers there that we talk about. We're going to talk about these distinctions. So let me slow down a bit here so that we can actually understand the meaning of this. I'm going to open this table and explain each. When you collect nominal data, first of all, before we come here, I want you to understand exactly what we're talking about here. We are referring to these numbers, all these numbers that are going to appear in our questionnaire. So because we already have a questionnaire in your example here, we're going to use this questionnaire because it also has some of other questions such as your age groups there. So we're talking about these numbers. Once we have interviewed the respondents, we're going to give this to your respondents and say, please complete the following questionnaire. And then the respondents will indicate here and say, for example, yes, I've heard about it, and maybe say yes here, and then maybe he will indicate like that, indicate like that. Once this data has been collected, it's going to be typed into Excel. So I want to show you how does your Excel will look like. Your Excel will look like something such as this one. And maybe you will have the first column written questionnaire number or respondent number. So this could be the number of respondents that you're going to interview. We know in this case, we're going to interview 450 in Durban area. So that will be respondent number 1, respondent number 2, up until respondent number 450. It will continue going down like that. And then here you'll have questions. For example, this will be question 1. I think in this case, they wrote them question A. So let's quickly follow the guidelines that we have here. Yeah, question A. So in Excel, it will be represented like this. Question B. Question C, continuing like that. So the first respondents will indicate for question A. And then if you look under question A, it was asking the respondents, have you ever heard about online subscription video on demand? He will just indicate yes or no. And then that will be 1 or 2. So after they've indicated, we're going to type respondent 1, he said 1. Respondent 2, he said yes. Respondent 3 said yes. Respondent 4, maybe all of them, they've heard about it. And then we've got that respondents who did not hear about it. Then you'll type 2 there where they said they haven't heard about it. So your data will look something similar to what I'm having on the screen now, up until all your 400 respondents or 450 respondents. These numbers, which are the answers to the questions that we ask. So these numbers that we've collected are the numbers that we're referring to when we're talking about the level of measurement. So these numbers, the question that is asking, so let's go back to the slide because now you understand what numbers are they referring to here. So these are the numbers that are used in a questionnaire. That number can be a nominal number or a nominal level. If it's a nominal level, it means the number is used as a classification or identification only. So the number does not have any order. There is no equal intervals. There is no absolute value. So in other example, the number that is used there is just used to assign. For example, we have a number for gender in this questionnaire. Or this question, have you ever heard about online video on subscription on demand? We've got a number that is assigned to yes, and that number is 1. The question is whether this number, it has any meaning. Is it important for yes to be 1? Is it important for yes to or it was supposed to be yes was supposed to be a 2 or yes was supposed to be a 3? And the answer to that is that no, this number it has no meaning. It's not important. The number is just used to classify the answers. For example, we could have used 10, we could have used 7, and then they circle those numbers there. It's just for us to know that 1 represent yes and 2 represent no. So that's what it means by nominal data. Let's use another example quickly here. Another example that we have, it will be this question. And in this question, what you have, you've got, please indicate your current age in years based on the below age group categories. 20 years, we give that number 1. So if I'm 19 years, I will circle number 1. Or if I'm more than 40 years, I will circle number 4. So this number that we have here, the level of measurement is asking, you unmute the mic, you have a question? Okay, so the level of measurement is asking whether this number, if it's a nominal number, for example, the one that we are using now, it's a nominal data, because these are just categories. This number is just assigned to this. It does not have any meaning or anything. We could have used any number. For example, we can take 4 and put it up here, followed by 3, followed by 2, followed by 1. It will still collect the relevant data that we need. So it does not mean that because we have 1 here, this age is important than the other age. The opposite will appear on a question such as this one. Like we ask, is 5 extremely aware or is 1 extremely aware? So 5, because I know a lot or I'm more aware, 5 has a meaning to the weight that is used to the category. So that's the meaning of the weights that you see in the levels of measurement. If it's a nominal data, is the basic form of categorizing your data, just to put numbers, but those numbers have no meaning. For example, we use those numbers when we ask questions about gender, when we ask about marital status, or it could be a soccer jersey. It does not mean that because a person is wearing a soccer jersey number 17, that person is more important than a person wearing soccer jersey number 2 and so on. So you will see that the number is just used for identification. It has no meaning, and that is nominal data. Ordinal data, it's important to use the order in the numbers like we see with our scale. For example, it should show starting from 1 to 5. There must be an order there. So it's asking about whether the order is important or not important. And then we've got the order that is important, that it must start from high to low or from low to high. It could be also from this, the one that is showing this, from low to high. So the order is important. So if the number, it becomes an ordinal data, which means we are rating, we are ranking, we are sorting the numbers. For example, this could be about satisfaction level or the attitudes that we collect. It becomes ordinal data. And then the difference between interval data and ordinal data is that with ordinal data, although the number is sorted from lowest to highest or from highest to lowest, we can see with interval data, we can actually see the difference between 2 points, meaning that if we look at the difference between not at all aware and slightly aware, we should be able to say this one is 2 times than the first number, but this is not the case with the ordinal data. Because if someone said, let's use an example of question D here, very dissatisfied, satisfied, and so on. If someone said, I'm very dissatisfied to this question, it does not mean that the person who said he is very satisfied is 5 times more happy than the person who said is very dissatisfied. That's not what it means. So interval data, it should be like that. We should be able to calculate the intervals between this number and this number and that number. And lastly, we've got ratio. With ratio data, this is whereby a 0 has a meaning that if you assign a 0 to your stats or your questionnaire, it indicates the absence of something. For example, if we ask questions such as money, how much is your bank balance? If you say I'm 0, there is a meaning to that 0. It means you are broke. If your age, you say you are 0, it means you are young or you were not born. If you say your height, you are 0, I don't know, you don't exist, or your weight is 0. So the 0 means, has a meaning in this case. So if a 0 has a meaning, it becomes a ratio data. Most of the time in marketing research, we are unable to, sometimes we use an example whereby you can ask a question, how old, let's use age. How old are you? If you ask a person, how old are you? The question, if you ask it in categories, it becomes a nominal data. For example, like the ones that we did here. This becomes a nominal data because we put them in categories. But if it was open-ended to say how old are you and then they put their age there, then it's not categories, it's no longer nominal data, it becomes a ratio data because they will enter their age and so on. So it's quite challenging to understand this. So please take your time at some time and read and understand on page 175. Go to internet, search on the internet, use Wikipedia, use some other videos as well to enhance your learning about the different types of levels of measurement because they're important for you to understand. They're important for you to understand because you don't want to draw a pie chart for a nominal data where else, or calculate the mean and say the average for gender. It won't make sense in your interpretation. When you interpret your data, this will always depend on the type of data that you have, whether it has nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio data. And then lastly, let's see if we can assess using an online quiz if you've learned, you understood this chapter. So we're gonna play a quizzes game with 12 questions for 1 minute each. So let's quickly have a learning activity which will conclude the class. For quizzes, we're gonna discuss that learning activity or the answers that you've obtained from the quizzes itself. So we're gonna call it learning activity 3. And this should take us about 10, it's just 12 questions, so it's about 12 minutes. So first thing first, you've already read the case study. If you haven't read the case study, you can quickly go through the case study, especially the research questionnaire, the one that you have here. Please try and read this questionnaire as quickly as possible and understand and try and evaluate if you find any mistakes there. We have to answer these questions, but they are on the quizzes. So you're gonna quickly play the quiz and then we're gonna analyze that. So read case study and questionnaire. It's a Showmax one. For better experience, we always advise that you use your smartphone. If you are in front of your computer and you also have your smartphone, use your smartphone for quizzes. And then you use your computer to refer. For example, you will look at the questionnaire or the case study in your computer screen, or you look at the scoreboard that you obtain. So that is learning activity 9. And then once you have read that, you join the quiz. So I'm gonna quickly start the game. So as soon as you think you are ready, you can also start the game. I'm gonna quickly paste instructions in the chat box, but if you played it previously, you know how it plays. You go to the quizzes website, it's gonna ask for a game code and you enter that game code there. So I'm gonna generate a game code for our quiz session. So just know that I'm available this site. I'm gonna keep quiet so that you can concentrate, because these are questions you must answer and read the question, as well as to read the case study, as well as the questionnaire itself to pick up the correct answers. So the instructions will be on the chat box of the Microsoft Teams, but as you see, I'm typing them here. You go to joinmyquiz.com, you enter game code 042483. So it is now 19 minutes past 2. So I'm gonna quickly mute myself so that you can concentrate. And then as soon as you're done playing the game, I'll be able to see the score. We'll quickly discuss feedback of the game. All right, it seems like we're all done. So I'm gonna end the game now so that we can generate the report and maybe just talk for a few minutes on those questions whereby we see a low rate or low accuracy rate there. So firstly, congratulations, Clifford, for being number 1. Maintaining a first position there. And you will see, Clifford, do you have any speech there? You want to thank your mom, your dad, and your parents? No speech. All right. So if we look here under your results or your score, I think you've done very well, except for question 2, where there is 0% accuracy there. What happened with question 2? So if we quickly review question 2, and let's see what was the question saying. Why couldn't you score a correct answer there? So question 2 was asking, evaluate the provided questionnaire by identifying a mistake where researcher provided respondents with a response option that is not applicable to a question. So you will see the pictures were very small. It was important for you to actually open the questionnaire itself somewhere and look at the questionnaire where there is a response option that is not applicable to a question. And you will see that is this question, question A. The other option is not relevant. Have you ever heard it's either yes or no? So that was question A, which was the correct answer for that. So let's quickly see if we can review your score here. Most of you 0-9 incorrect. It was question A. As you can see, 5 players indicated question 5, whereby he asked about regarding restrictions on lockdown. You will see the question here was not applicable, but the question itself was not applicable for that question, but that's not what this question was asking you. This question was saying a response option. So we've got the question, we've got the response option. Always remember that a response option is an answer. So we're asking about an answer that was not applicable to a question rather than the question itself. I'm sure you saw this question somewhere as well, asking you a question that was not relevant to the study objectives, and I think you've managed to score it correctly, hence the accuracy is high there. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our today class learning session. I hope it was fun. So in the chat box, please comment with your mood, a happy face if you are happy or anything there, or just to say goodbye. I will see you again next time. Please read Learning Activity 8 and try and identify the errors in a survey on Learning Activity 8. Have a lovely day, ladies and gentlemen. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye, Temi.